the Sustainability Management Master's Program, you're answering one simple question. Do you care about your future generation? If you care about your kids, their grandkids, then you care about sustainability. And a sustainability manager is someone who has the tools to make people understand how they can contribute towards developing a sustainable world. We have both part-time and full-time students. Our curriculum is 30 hours. Instead of thesis, we have a research project course and a seminar course which provides them with the kind of research background they will need to be successful in their job. But at the same time, sustainability is not always everything about environment. It also relates to the business. They will take a sustainable business strategies course. They will take a project management course. Most of these courses are going to be taught by industry people, the people who are doing sustainability on a daily basis as a part of their job. Any organization that has a large number of employees and has a physical infrastructure, they will have to have a sustainability office. If you have the passion to develop and maintain a sustainable world, come to us and we will help you shape your passion into a career which will create an impact.
The Stevens Institute of Technology is proud to present the Hugo New Corporation Sustainability Seminar Series, co-sponsored by Geocentric Consultants, H2M Architect Engineers, Brown & Codwell, and BEM Systems.
Thanks. Hi, how's everybody doing today? Good, good. Well, obviously, you guys know my name, Erik Ford, Executive Director of the New Jersey Energy Coalition. First, thanks to the Stevens Institute and everybody for inviting me. And yeah, sorry about last semester, snowstorm, things happen. Live about 2.5 hours away, so it takes a little while to get here. So you can imagine a snowstorm. And the night before, I just found out we were going to have a second child, so I was like, what do I do, right? So, thank you. On that, give you a little bit about my background. I was the confidential aide to the president of the board, former president now, Rick Morose. We dealt with a lot of issues when I was there. Everything from cybersecurity to dealing with PJM, FERC issues, which I'm going to talk about a little further on. And ultimately, everything that has to do with the energy and really utility sector. There'll be an underlying theme here that energy and economy are connected. They're one and the same. When you think about electricity and you think about the energy, the first thought is, what part of the economy is it? It's the first part. Because if you don't have the lights, you don't have the power, you don't have the energy, you don't have an economy. So that's my background. A little bit about the coalition. It's about 13 years old. It was formed with the idea to have a better voice out there for the energy sector and to help keep the nuclear power plants around as well as other fuels. So one of the things I'll tell you is I do not pick a fuel when it comes to energy. I will not tell you one fuel is better than the other. I will tell you have to have a good mix because at the end of the day, we're talking about sustainability, right? Well, it comes down to reliability. How do you make sure the lights stay on? Each of those will all, in a way, help, no matter what. And through that, we have about 70 plus members. We have members that are obviously energy companies, some are utility companies, some are actually water companies. Some are cyber firms, other are the firms that actually go out there and do the surveys. We also have a few universities that joined, obviously because there's a growing interest in the energy sector. So, now, I pulled this quote earlier this week. Obviously, my presentation changed a little bit after realizing I wasn't coming in February. And, when you think about sustainability, there's three aspects you think about: access, reliability, cost effectiveness. And you want to be, at the end of the day, environmentally responsible, right? It's an encompassing term. It's an idea. And I found this on Forbes, a lot of good stuff there. I probably read that every morning about 4:30 in the gym. So here's some of the things I'm going to talk about real quick. It's a lot, right? You see DER on there. Anybody know what DER is? Solar power, offshore wind obviously is a big subject, right? Energy storage is another aspect of it. Those two are interconnected eventually along the line, which I'll explain to you AMI, anybody know what AMI is? Advanced Metered Infrastructure. So you know that phone you're walking around with? Imagine one day being able to control everything that has to do with your house, your heat and everything, basically your whole life, be able to control your home, which is the way we're going anyway, right? But even more so, the energy companies putting that forth to have better communications with the system and have a better ability to really manage what's necessary for the grid and for the natural gas to get to your homes and your businesses for it to work. Yeah, it helps with making it more efficient, which leads to more sustainability. Got to build out a communication system, and again, thinking about energy sources. Infrastructure is another one, and behind that, there's two different parts of the infrastructure when it comes to the transportation of the energy. There's distribution and transmission. One falls under one government control, one falls under another government control. Two different. Neither one have a say over the other. But both interact and you have to deal with it, just the way it is. FERC, anybody want to know what FERC is? They are the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. They regulate everything, right? Everything that has to do with the energy sector under their purview. That means natural gas, that means the electrical power going from New Jersey to New York, power plants, how things are allowed to be built, whether or not there should be a wheel to move the power from one state to the other. And then you move into RTOs, regional transmission operators. And I'll show you the map in a second. So regional transmission operators, right now we're in what's called PJM interconnection. They've been around since 90 plus years. J is New Jersey. Originally it was Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland. It's grown into 14 states now, actually 13 states and one territory, which is DC. Then smart cities, which is part of sustainability. Microgrids. Anybody know what microgrids are? Anybody design them or take a look at them? Yeah.
Microgrids are effectively independent sections that they, if anything were to happen to the main grid, they can cut themselves off and continue operating. Major Transit's putting it for their electrification out by Kearney.
Yes, you're right. So they're behind microgrids. There are all these issues that need to be worked out. You know, at the end of the day, who owns those lines? How do you make sure those lines are maintained? Who controls that switching on and off? Seriously, think about it. If that microgrid was on at the same time PSE&G's power in this building, probably got a problem, right? So that even managing that is an issue. Transportation, I have on there, AFVs. I heard someone earlier tonight before the class started talking about that. That's a growing sector, growing issues there. Obviously, New Jersey's pushing forward with the EVs. Last week, the Board of Public Utility took up a vote and did put forth $30 million to do a support of EVs in the state, right? And we'll get into that a little later. And then last thing I put on there is all hazard approach. So that's what I'm talking about. You know, that's why I don't pick a fuel. You're gonna, if you have offshore wind, you have solar, you have nuclear, you have combined heat and power, natural gas, and even coal. You know, they all provide something to the grid, one or the other. And when you think about renewables, are they 100% reliable? Right? That's where storage comes in. That way you have the storage. On top of that, when you have offshore wind and everything, you have to make sure that the energy coming onto the grid is the same harmonic pitch that everything else is on the grid, right? So if you have something swirling around, obviously you're going to have an issue if it's not on the same pitch. So that leads to that. Along with all hazards is cybersecurity. Big deal. I don't know if you guys watch or hear anything in the news. You hear everybody talking about cybersecurity issues all the time, and more bad actors are trying to target energy companies and utilities. Now, those are both interchangeable, but not. And I say that because utilities aren't all energy companies, and energy companies aren't all utilities, right? Theoretically. So, take for example, PSEG. You know, they have they're a big utility in the state, but they also own nuclear, which is separate, but still part of the company as PSEG as a whole. And then you got to think about natural disasters. Major issue, right? Anybody remember Sandy? Superstorm Sandy, right? You know, and if you pay attention to what's going on down in Florida, anytime there's a hurricane, what's the first thing people do? They go out, they get gas, right? They make sure their generator has diesel fuel of all things, and they say, how do I keep this on? And that's a legitimate issue. And after Superstorm Sandy, the state took a all hazards approach to figure out what do we need to do to ensure, should something like this ever happen again, which is a possibility, what do we need to do to be better prepared? And that's one of the jobs as a regulator, is always asking that question. So my background working at the Board of Public Utilities before doing this gives me a different perspective. Like my thought is always, okay, if we do X, then how do we make sure A, B, and C still worked? Or what do we do to ensure that at the end of the day, everything stays on? Let's say there's a cyber attack, right? What's the first thing you would do? Well, there's all sorts of steps, but the state took up some initiatives. One's called the NJ Kick, where the public can actually reach out and submit what's happened to them. And through a process, that organization inside the state government actually helps firms out and businesses and individuals too. So this is PJM. You can see how big it is. You can see it encompasses all of New Jersey, Pennsylvania, goes all the way out to Illinois, and all the way down to North Carolina. It's a big grid, right? It's actually one of the biggest in the country. And you can also see the different companies that are inside this territory. And you can see in New Jersey you have 4. So when you talk about sustainable energy, you look at the different grids, and the first thing you think about is, okay, who's really managing all this at the end of the day? So PJM manages the grid. They make sure there's enough available electricity for the public to be able to use, and they manage that. They work with the utilities, and the utilities make sure that they had the proper infrastructure to be able to move that where it needs to go. Now, at the same time, there's a cost to that, right? Anybody in here finance majors? No? So when you're designing all this stuff, one of those things you want to talk about is figuring out how do you pay for it, right? How do you make sure you have the right dollars coming in? How do you make sure at the end of the day, it's not just sustainable economically, but also environmentally? You want those two to work one and the same. So PJM obviously has a big say. You can see that they encompass several states, and being in DC, they tend to have a little more say what's going on. A lot of other RTOs will look at what PJM is doing to figure out what their future steps are, because PJM is about 90 years old, right? BPU is about 110. If you give and take, you go back to when those started, that was around the time of Teddy Roosevelt, trust busters and all that. So think about the regulatory aspects that have grown over those years because of that. So, and this is, and what PJM does is, take renewables, for example, for sustainability. You have to figure out what's available. Capacity versus availability is a big question. And if you don't have enough availability, that means something else has to come on at a different price. And I would say, one of the things you guys want to think about is reaching out to PJM, see if they come in for a class. Good opportunity to hear what they have to say, and learn a little bit about what they do. So nuclear energy. It's one of the first things I have on there. Nuclear energy from last year, 42.5% of the state's electricity is produced by nuclear. Most of the rest of that is produced by natural gas, just so you know. Give or take, a little around 5% are renewables. And what do I mean by that? So renewables, I mean, let's take hydro, as well as solar, and some storage, stuff like that. And that's what makes up the rest of it. So nuclear provides a big chunk of electricity to the grid, but it also provides something else. It's a baseload unit. So what do I mean by baseload? Right? It means they guarantee that there's always going to be a certain amount of electricity flowing, a certain amount of energy always available. Now, that means that they always have to be working. So that's something you have to think about when you're talking about sustainability. Because, when the sun goes down, solar's not running, these things kick on, but they can't be kicked up and down like everybody else. That's why other forms of energy exist. And one of the questions I've gotten in the last few weeks, is there any coal left? There's no coal left in New Jersey. There may be one plant if PS still has it open, but I know they're closing it either way, so, there's no call.
Well, I was going to say, like, how does it work across state lines, though, if energy is coming from Pennsylvania to New Jersey?
So these guys help to regulate that. And that goes back to FERC, too. So there's interactions between those organizations that oversee that at the end of the day. And PJM has pretty much the oversight for transmission as opposed to distribution. The line coming in your house is considered distribution. The line going across from one state to other, stuff like that, that's basically considered transmission. What's that?
Across the country?
They only control this territory that you see there. Now, other states, take New York. New York is its own RTO. There's no other one included on it. New England is its own RTO. All those states involved in it. California runs its own system. Texas has
its own body. It's like the one level above it. It's its own entity that effectively it could simply not connect with anyone and still be fine.
Yeah.
Because it has its own standards.
Theoretically, yes. Theoretically, yeah. And I say that because what you'll find out as you look into like how the energy is procured and where it's coming from, you tend to also see that there are generators in other parts, let's say the Midwest, for wind, that are then feeding into the PJM territory, even though they're not in PJM, but they're feeding into it because they're coming in at a cheaper rate at the end of the day. And that's one of the fundamental things right there. So nuclear, as you can see, it provides a lot of carbon-free emissions. Actually, it's virtually carbon-free, right? And there's been a debate, obviously, in the state the last couple of years, but at the end of the day, nuclear is a good thing, not just because of the carbon, but also for resiliency. Again, let's think about this, right? Let's say a Category 3 is coming up the coast. We have offshore wind. You have some backup connected to it. But at the end of the day, when those turbines have to turn off because of the tropical forces and everything else, that nuclear power plant is still going to run, right? And then those natural gas supplied electric generators, they'll be able to kick on too and bring on what they need to help offset it. So you got to look at it, what works at that time. Take Hoboken, for example. I know you guys, I don't know how well you guys are versed with the microgrid they designed here, but that was one of the things when I was at the BPU, we were starting to kick off the microgrid report, the whole aspect. Anyway, so another one I want to bring up to you is renewable natural gas. And the ideas behind it is that it's renewable because we all have garbage, right? It goes to landfill, goes somewhere, it gets broken down. It's going to create methane and other gases. So what they've been doing is, what companies have been doing is capturing that methane, cleaning it, and the technology has gotten to the point in which now they're able to have it really well cleaned. And it can be used for various areas. CNG trucks, vehicles, heating buildings, going to supply the industrials, going to electric grid. And after that, so in the last couple of years with natural gas power plants, they've come up with a new ability to capture the CO2 coming off the plants. Fully capture, and this fits into sustainability, they can take that CO2 and make it into carbon fiber and other products. Thereby, they're producing zero emissions, and at the same time, products for other industries and electricity. So you think about that, that's a win-win-win. So if you think about offshore wind, right? You got to build the turbines, you got to build the boats, you got to supply the fuel. Well, natural gas is one of those that could probably help with that, just by supplying the raw material. Smart grids. What do you guys know about smart grids? Anyone? Goes back to AMI. So when you think about smart grids, which is where we're going when it comes to sustainability, you can see some of the different aspects that are connected. You see solar, you see the energy storage, you see offshore wind, you see onshore wind, you see the different types of power supplies that are available to the grid and to the homes. And with that, to build the smart grids that people are always looking at, hoping for, that are going to come down, you have to have a stronger infrastructure. There has to be a comprehensive infrastructure. Take Hoboken, for example. Let's take that for a minute, right? You have a microgrid that's being designed. Well, you had to put the infrastructure in. You had to build the pipes. You had to put the wires in. And they did it all themselves, so they own it all. So at the end of the day, they know how to manage it, where it's going to be managed, right, theoretically, and they're able to keep it running when they need it to. Now, advanced meter infrastructure gives you an ability to really, if you want to, get down to the granular data, and that's where it gets even bigger. So you want to, so from that you can know where you're going to need energy at what time, at what given point. So take New York City, for example. You guys are across from it, right? They obviously need a lot of power, right? And you see the Brooklyn building up all the time. Over there, the utility over there had to come up with a concept that was a non-wire system. Non-wires, right? And because at the time, they were looking at, you have all this build out of these new buildings and everything. Well, you need more energy at the end of the day. So how do you manage that? Do you put a new plant in Brooklyn? Do you run new lines from all the way from the Adirondacks down to New York City? Or do you come up with a different solution, right? So really, I mean, companies are looking at what are the other plans? What are some things they need to figure out? And what they figured out was a non-wire solution. So they're able to work throughout the morning. People are getting up, more power is being used. They can actually manage that better because of an advanced meter infrastructure. And what that also does, take New Jersey, for example, right? Your power goes out, you have to call the electric company, they roll someone out, that costs money and time. Plus that vehicle coming out is also pushing out CO2, right? And other types of gas as well. In other states where they've used AMI, say Maryland, for example, Baltimore Gas and Electric down there has been able to show that they reduced their truck rolls by over 70%. So think about that for a minute. That's a reduction there. So AMI provides a lot more, and it doesn't just help the companies, it helps people, helps you manage. So let's say you have a house, right? From that data over time, you'll be able to figure out when you're really going to be using energy and when you're not, and where you can pinpoint. And the technology is getting better to the point in which AMI, it's not just the meters and the infrastructure, but even the circuit breakers are being looked at to be able to tell you exactly when things are being used and how. And that's a good thing because we're all humans and we want to be more efficient. So, 25 years from now, what's it going to look like? How's the grid going to look? How's our cities going to be different? Will it be different? So you got to understand the regulatory process in New Jersey. So I showed you what PJM and FERC, well, PJM is. Explained to you FERC is the federal regulatory agency, and PJM is the RTO. So they both have say over the electric grid. Then you have the BPU. They regulate the state. Now, BPU was started in 1907. It's obviously a little over 100 years old. They were actually started as railroad commissioners. And then over time, within the first few years, they realized they needed to add in all the other utilities, and over time, the railway obviously was taken out. So they oversee the utilities at the end of the day, and all the utilities, gas, water, electric, everything that makes your life work. So there are a lot of issues that come their way. And this, obviously, if you guys have paid attention this year, the Energy Master Plan has been a hot topic. There's a forward-thinking Energy Master Plan. There's a lot of ideas behind it. At the same time, there's some concerns of how do you really get there. So the process. Anybody been to a public hearing? What'd you think?
You mean on the energy?
Yeah, or any.
I thought it was exciting to see all the looking forward, the energy. I wonder how much of it will come to reality. A few of us were there.
Right. So that's the start of the process. That's part of the process. Go ahead.
I know a big part of it was that a lot of people were I guess rallying for the plan to make sure that those instating it were actually getting this done, not just mentioning these new technologies to happen. That was a big thing that happened with it. That's going on.
So some of the technologies are like EVs, right?
Yeah.
So the question is, how do you get those EVs going? How do you get them out there? As I said, the board last week voted to put out the money to help support that idea. And by the way, under the previous administration, under the Christie administration, this is something we were taking a look at. The figure out what are the first steps. How do you determine, when it comes to electric vehicles, are they energy efficient? Are they not? Do they fall under clean energy? And so part of the process for New Jersey, part of the regulatory is the Clean Energy Division. The Clean Energy Division oversees a societal benefits fund. That fund is roughly collected a year about $500 million, right? They divvy up the money, they put it out in different aspects to different organizations and towns. They do ESIPs, which is a good program, helps out municipalities and schools. And then also, at the end of the day, it's a pot of money where you can look at to say, what are we going to do with this now? And it can be transformational, energy efficient, and that's really dependent on those 5 commissioners making that decision. Now, obviously, policy and politics, right? They go kind of hand to hand at times, so you can understand each administration has a different take. So the process, when you're putting forth this idea of anything in the energy that's regulated within the boundaries of the state laws, rules, and regulations, falls under the BPU. All right. Anything that is federal goes to the FERC and or PJM. And there's all sorts of hotly contested issues going on all the time. If you guys ever really get bored one night, you need to take a nap, read about MOPR. All right. MOPR. M-O-P-R. MOPR. It is, there's an ongoing issue behind that's been there for years. Like I said, when I was at the board, working for the president, now former president, we dealt with every type of issue, from dealing with issues with FERC, dealing with issues with PJM, dealing with everything in and around the energy sector, but also water sector. So going back to microgrids and talking about sustainability, one of the things is you look at a microgrid and you say, where does this make sense to connect, right? So when I was at the BPU, we issued a report in 2016 on microgrids. We took a full-fledged, comprehensive analysis of everything that was available in and around the state, what systems may work and whatnot. And we put this out in the fall of 2016. And we went through a process where 13, were awarded a grant to do a feasibility. And from that, after I left, the board now is in the next phases, awarding or saying which ones should go forth and which ones not. And our approach was, let them all. Let's see which ones are feasible to get done, see what they had to present, and where do they want to connect. One of them, I'll tell you, they took into consideration because of Superstorm Sandy. They want to make sure the bagel shop and the diner's connected because they need to feed the people, right? Another one wanted to make sure that it was partially connected to the train system, right? One of the ideas that we floated around, which makes sense, is go back to electric vehicles, right? Superstorm Sandy, people go to fill up on gas. Some of those pumps didn't work, didn't have electricity, or they did and they're flooded by salt water. So why not, for a resiliency theory idea, have these microgrids also use electric vehicles, where they have so people can actually legitimately connect their EVs to recharge, right? Now you have an ability for transportation. And from there, you just build off of that. Now, going back to EVs too, when you think about them always taking the energy, but they can also be a storage unit, right? They can also supply back onto the grid. And that's another question that's been coming up the last few years. Is that a possibility? How do you do that? Are there inverters that can do that? There are. But are we there yet from a technology standpoint? Probably. Are we there from a policy standpoint? Some states are, some states aren't. That's the other thing. Going back to understanding the regulatory process. Each state in our union sets their own policies, right? Which then influence the different RTOs they're a part of, which then is also influenced by the FERC and also influenced by other types of things that are passed in Congress and whatever executive orders are put out. So there's a lot that goes on. So you want to get something done, you got to think about what are the different processes that's really going to take at the end of the day. And like I said, when you think about the energy, you got to think about the economy, right? So anything you do when it comes to policy, from a policy standpoint, this is where I go back, put my former BPU hat on. Any policy you do, you think, how does this impact the economy, right? Because when you're making decision at a place like the Board of Public Utilities, you're affecting every person in the state, right? Every person, not just, the ratepayers, but the families, the businesses, and so forth. So you want to make sure that those policies that are put out there will have a positive impact the best you can. Say that because policies are basically types of theories. You want to get to that level. Go back to the EMP. You right? The energy companies, they do believe in this idea behind sustainability. They have committed to it, and it's something that's a part of their culture. And I put up 3 of the companies that are in New Jersey: PSE&G, SJI, New Jersey Resources. SJI, I'm sorry, Exelon. So Exelon, if you take a look at it, if today they put out some information about their sustainability plan that they put together in 2018, where they're going to make sure that they can get you to clean energy. If you want to buy clean energy, they'll make sure you can get it. PSE&G, their commitment, Ralph Izzo and their corporation is committed to putting forth these ideas of sustainability. One of the things that Ralph Izzo has said is that they do not plan, not to quote him perfectly, but about natural gas plants that provide electricity, they don't foresee them building any more new ones. Although they have a couple in the works, that's probably about it for now. But they're going to look at it, which means they take it serious. New Jersey Resources, they're serious about it too. Again, going back to corporate citizenship, these guys, these companies, these organizations, their leaders are behind it. They're committed to it, and they believe in it. And that's why I say it's something you want to take in and really understand. And I recommend you guys going to their websites, taking a look at it, reading what they're putting out, because it'll give you a sense of where they're seeing things. And it's good. You need to hear them. They're the experts at the end of the day. Going back to AMI. Go back to AMI. They're the ones that have to make sure this all works at the end of the day. They're going to use AMI to put it out there, to make sure it works, make sure that they can deliver to you what you want. So I want to give you a couple of other places to look at. There's Office of Sustainability at DEP. Anybody know what DEP is?
Yes.
What do you think?
They are slow.
They're government. Government's slow.
Yes.
It's the way it works. It's America. Just the way we are. Our government's purposely designed that way. Right?
Yeah.
Right. Like I said, the microgrid report, which I put right there for you guys, good resource to take a look at, helps you understand what is available, what's been available, what they're looking at. The Clean Energy website for the New Jersey Clean Energy Department, a lot of good resources. I also suggest taking a look at the legislative action going on, because anybody hear about the recent constitutional amendment that's been thrown out there by the legislator? Yeah. So again, legislation, policies, these are all intertwined, and planning, development. They're all interconnected. One hits the other. No. Another thing you got to think about when policies, legislation are put out, there's a question of how will the financial markets react? How's the bond market going to react? Is it going to cost you 0.2% more to bond something in New Jersey now because of a piece of legislation that's just thrown out there? And then think about it. Now it costs more to do business. So anything you do when you're in a position like this, or at the BP, there's a lot going on. I would suggest take a look at it. The EMP, we're talking about that. There's a lot behind that, a lot in it. The previous one under Christie focused a lot on making sure we had enough build out. This one, as some said, it's got a lot of ideas, a lot of theories. Can it get done? Possibly. What do you guys think the biggest hiccup may be for it, for the EMP? Any thoughts? Go ahead.
I don't know if they mentioned being carbon neutral.
They did.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I know there's like a big discrepancy of what that actually means.
Sure. Yeah.
But,
It's a question, right? Anyone else? Anyone else want to think about what maybe one of the biggest influences on the EMP going forward?
I was gonna say probably reaching like a renewable energy standard by like 2050.
Yeah, that's part of it. Yeah. So the other part of it is other governors, right? You will have another governor after this one, right? It's going to happen. And so this energy policy, energy master plan was put out by this administration, right? You could have another administration come in 15, 20 years from now and say, no, this isn't doable anymore. Or they may say, we need to go even further. So like I'm saying, so, you know, it's a plan. And it's not a bad one. You know, who doesn't want a clean energy? Who doesn't want a better environment? Who doesn't want a more sustainable world, right? There's no one. No one on that. So, questions, thoughts, concerns?